Hey everyone, Larry Walsh here at Channelnomics. We live in a world that's completely digital. It's not all digital, but it might as well be. I mean, the analog systems are evaporating and eroding rapidly. I mean, we walk around with supercomputers in our pockets, and we're building data centers at breakneck pace to fuel the AI revolution. But there's a massive catch to all of this. We're all tethered, whether we are an individual person, somebody lugging around a laptop, we're loading up a server into a rack in a data center. We're all tethered to a power outlet. At some point or another, we have to plug in our phones, plug in our PCs, plug in our servers, plug in our cars. Uh, and this is putting in a tremendous strain on our ability to keep up with the demand for electricity. Demand for electricity is reaching a crisis level. Goldman Sachs predicts that data center power will grow 165% by 2030. And we're already seeing a lot of the fallout from that. I mean, our electric grid here in the US, Canada, and in much of Europe, our electric grid was built a century ago. This is not cutting edge technology. We're dealing with ancient technology. And the grid is really straining under the pressure. And it's driving up the cost of electricity for consumers and for businesses. It's creating a lot of pressure on local infrastructure to the point of where you're now seeing communities revolt against data center development. You're seeing utility companies that were once trying to decommission coal and gas fired plants to keep them in operations for years because they just can't lose the capacity. This is really a big problem, and it's getting bigger. You're even seeing now companies like Amazon and Microsoft investing in nuclear energy and building out new nuclear technologies, or at least reviving the old ones, just because they need to power individual data centers, much less masses of them. So energy management well, I shouldn't say it's becoming, it already is a big issue. It's becoming an even bigger issue. It is a massive new frontier for the channel, both on the vendor side as well as on the partner side. It represents a convergence of physical plant and IT networks. And leading the charge into this right now is a company that most of you probably never heard of, called Abundant IoT. It's a company that coined the term EIoT, energy IoT, and they're building a new brand of partner, a new breed of resellers, new cadre of expertise that is out there selling not just energy, but selling the means of controlling, managing, and optimizing energy consumption so that we can both save money. I mean, by both us as the customers can save money, but also ensure that there is enough power in the system to operate the infrastructure that we need for the next generation of technology, particularly IoT. So joining us on this episode of Changing Channels is Vince Bradley. He's the CEO and founder of Abundant IoT. He's also was the founder and CEO of WTG, a master agent, which they now call Technology Services Distributors. And Abundant IoT is his second act. And it's not unfamiliar territory to him, as you'll hear him talk about, is that he was into energy more than a decade ago. But now the convergence of demand for more energy, as well as the limited supply and the aging infrastructure, is creating this new massive opportunity for his company, the vendors that he represents, the non-technology vendors that he's working with, as well as the partners downstream that are servicing customers. Vince is here to tell us all about it. This is Changing Channels. Let's get into it. Vince Bradley, thanks for joining us here on Changing Channels.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Good to see you, Larry.
Good to see you as well. You know, I want to make all kinds of power jokes here. Let's power this up. Let's make let's shock some people with what we have to say. Yada yada. But you really have. I don't want us to be so cavalier as to say you stumbled into an opportunity, but talk about great timing with Abundant IoT, of walking into a period of where you're providing management services and in systems management, but also at the time when we are at an inflection point of energy demand. Tell us a little bit about your backstory on Abundant IoT And what's it like right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story because we came from telecom tech, and but we got into energy back in 2009. So when the downturn happened and the recession happened, it was an opportunity. People had asked us about energy or asked other services, and so we jumped in. So it's been over 15 years in the space, and that was a nice thing because now energy, as you know, is a huge thing. And we've cracked it into the channel. We've been able to add energy to the channel, mainly just because we have that background, but now we're connecting it to the IoT as well. And I can unpack that a little bit more, but
Yeah.
essentially that's what we're doing. And what's nice about it right now is, again, with that inflection point in power, it is absolutely exploding right now in a good way. So yeah, I've never worked like this, Larry. I used to joke, I work 100 hours a week when, you're shifting something, when you're, doing a big project. Well, that's kind of my pace now. So
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
proud of it, but I'm passionate about what I'm doing. So it
Yeah.
fills me up. You know what I'm saying? It's like before I'm saving money and helping people become more efficient, but now I'm purpose-based impact and, tapping all those channel relationships that we've had for a long time and essentially upselling energy via IoT. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah. Again, I think it's fascinating. Again, the timing is the thing that is most incredible here. But this is talk about a slow moving target. And I remember back in 2009 when you and others in the telecom channel were exploring other avenues of potential revenue sources, new opportunities, and energy being one of them. It seemed interesting back then, but not all that tangible. It was felt more like expense management than it really was about optimization. And now here we are with this AI boom, and we're seeing the headlines everywhere is that the demand and the strain on the power grid, and everybody, you have to remember the American power grid, much like the power grid in Canada and much of Europe, was built a century ago. We're not dealing with huge new technologies. We're dealing with real legacy analog systems in many cases. You know, the AI, the data centers that are coming around are really putting a strain on all of it. Talk a little bit about that, Vince. How much of the AI boom is really steering in your direction, or at least opening up opportunities for your partners?
Well, I think, the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, a quote that from about him, right? He went in front of Congress last year and said that the world's use of AI from energy is 3%, but it's going to 99% in just a few years. And I think that statement right there kind of says a lot about answers your question well. The question is, how much can you the second part of the answer would be, how much can you monetize in the channel? And I would argue that there's a tremendous opportunity here. For example, a $1.6 billion deal that we did last year, paying $40 million, over $40 million in commissions over the next 3 years. I mean, that's like a different stratosphere, right? From what we were used to in the telecom channels, with the recurring revenue and all that. So, yeah, some people have said, well, isn't that upfront commission? And I'm like, yeah, but are you complaining? I mean, you know what I mean? It's almost like over
Yeah.
3 years, it's almost like an annuity or residual. Things have changed, and the channel has a tremendous opportunity in energy, particularly because of AI proliferation in the data center space. But also big C&I, big commercial industrial customers are also going off the grid. Everyone's going off the grid right now. To your point, the grid is dilapidated. It's expensive. It's so hard to keep it going. And again, new tech is here. Fuel cells, linear generators, right? With renewable technology that the hyperscalers need, right? Their mission statements say they need it. But the point here is that there's no way that we can get through all of this with just the traditional fuels, right? Green fuels were incented in the OBBB last year, and that's a tremendous opportunity. And that's why I think it's a great opportunity for the channel. So kind of shifting, The channel, all they really need to do is expand and say, hey, with the proliferation of IoT, now energy is now connected to tech. That's a great way to put it. And I think that if people can start that narrative, they can have a tremendous impact. But just to quickly cap that off, tremendous opportunity for the channel here. I mean, it's energy has not been part of the channel traditionally, and that was my mission, to go and crack it into the channel, and that's what we've done.
Vince, as I'm listening to you talk about this, first, I want to get into your model because I think it's derivative of the telecom channel, or at least the traditional telecom channel. But you're also in selling and in leveraging the power of digital devices, either the embedded technology within them or IoT devices that are riding on top of them to provide management. What exactly are you selling? You say IoT, but then you say energy and the different types of energy consumables. Is it one, the other, a combination of both? What's the real source of value here?
Well, I think a picture tells 1,000 words, right? So our ecosystem image, is something that we can, put in the chat here, get that going. That will help a lot because it kind of shows you an image of all the different products and services. But essentially, it's all the things that people know about. LED lighting, solar, right? Those are good examples for a minute for me to unpack. Here's why: because they didn't have sensors 10 years ago. Right? Some of them did, but now they all have sensors. There's no question that there's sensors in everything now. And so that's why I love it, because it's a technical motion now, right? Energy is becoming technical now, because if you connect it to the IoT, it's all part of the same network. But to fully answer the question, so LED lighting, solar, electricity and natural gas, the actual services themselves, the recurring services, which is actually the recurring revenue of the energy business in the channel, by the way, the actual electricity and gas. We can help with that. Other things would include like the generators. We do all kinds of generators now. Why? Because everyone's going off the grid. And so what we're doing is leveling them up from diesel to natural gas, or from natural gas to renewable and green fuels, right? Because that's, again, as I said, that's where it needs to go to sustain the amount of power coming at us. So that's kind of high level. We do a lot of other things related to that, like the harmonic filter is an interesting one. This is a device that we can put in on the power panel of a customer, and it removes the bad and dirty power that we all have heard about, these slang terms. Mm-hmm. But what it does, it's nice, is it lowers the electric bill. People don't know it, but before you even turn the light on, you're paying 8% more than you should on your electric bill. And that blows people's minds. It's not about what's on. It's about what's just plugged in. Just plugging equipment in creates the harmonics, to be clear, even if they're not on. So we can save double-digit percentage on the electric bill with that device. We can help them to protect their equipment, because harmonics are very damaging to the equipment itself. And finally, it helps with sustainability and ESG, because it is a power-saving device by the USDE. So those are some high-level examples of it. But again, I think that ecosystem really gives the 1,000 words.
So when you talk about this, and this is the thing that I find most fascinating about, when we use a word like ecosystem, typically we're talking about other types of technology or service providers that come into the IT equation, or even the telecom equation. But what you're talking about, at least that's what I think I'm hearing you say, is that the ecosystem that you're tapping into is multi-sector. You have the IT side of it, which is the devices. You have the power generation. That's another side of it, a potential the sourcing of all this. Mm-hmm. And then you also have, in some instances, if I'm hearing you correctly, that you're also talking about the energy generators, the equipment that goes into creating these energy. Is that essentially, are you expanding? Are you like creating an ecosystem that goes beyond what we would consider to be traditional?
Absolutely. And I will say, we're not at the point where we can connect every single thing in our ecosystem, but we're making progress. So what we have done, just to be clear about it, is the IoT part of it. Mm-hmm. Again, our name, Abundant IoT, We started off, with that name and the technical motion because we come from tech, right? And because of the example I use, LED and solar now having the sensors, right? It connects everything. But really, essentially, we're more of an energy company because of what's happened with energy in the past previous few years, right? So essentially, yes, we're connecting all of that together, and we're doing it in a technical way. But just to give you one more piece of it, the 915 spectrum, the long PHY, which is at the top of that image, that's LoRaWAN technology, which is low power, low bandwidth, but long distance, up to 100 miles, by the way. So think of ag tech and stuff like that. Like, hey, is that trap occupied? Yes. Well, now I don't have to roll a truck 80 miles to go out and check it every day, right? Keeps it technical. So yes, we are absolutely bringing untraditional products into the channel ecosystem.
So let's pivot back, because I think this is a good point to bring in what your model is. Again, you describe it as your roots being in telecom, and everyone, when Vince and I first met, he was still head of WTG when it was an independent, back then we called it a master agent. Today we call them technology services distributors or something like that. It's hard to tell, Vince, they keep changing their minds. But it does sound, though, a little bit like your model is derivative of that you're selling contracts, you're collecting commissions, and you're handing off to another provider. Is that still the case, or is there still value add or other opportunities involved here?
I'd say we're a hybrid. We're a provider, and we do the billing on all of the IoT and a lot of the energy services. But to your point, there are some services that we don't go there, like electricity and natural gas. We're really what's called a master broker in that space. Because if you try to resell electricity and natural gas, well, that better be the focus of what you're doing. And that's all you're doing. It's called a rep, a retail energy provider. And there's lots of them out there, but that's a whole different business model. And just to give you an example, other companies like Schneider Electric and others are also just brokers of the electricity and gas, to be clear. So yeah, most of it, the IoT, the technical stuff, we're doing the billing. We're a provider for those services, and some of the energy as well. But some of the stuff is also brokerage. Here's the main point, though, Larry. What we do is we do the same things that customers want in every case, right? What's going on? What problems are happening in the facility? Let's address those problems first with IoT. Let's fix it, access door or a refrigerator or whatever it needs to happen. Let's address the problem for the customer. And then let's look at everything else. Hey, how can we save you money? How can we make you more efficient, et cetera, right? So, but the key here is that we're going to do a couple things for that customer. We're going to identify the solution to the problem. We're going to give them a quote, and we're going to project manage everything for them. And that's really what they want. Even if they get 2 or 3 bills, customers don't mind that. And we're on the journey to put it all on one bill, but I don't think anyone's done that yet. So it might take a minute. My point is that we can help now to impact, increase efficiency, and reduce costs for customers.
Okay, so I get all that. That sounds. First of all, I agree with you. It's more of a hybrid opportunity, and I would imagine that the number of the companies that you're working with and you're selling through, they probably look more like the agents of old, but probably also evolving, as most of them are now as well. But the customer is different. So the customer who typically is dealing with the electric bill dealing with gas and other forms of power, they're not necessarily the same as the telecom guys, and definitely not the IT guys. So how much of a change in the conversation is this? And are you and your partners having to bring these buyers together inside their organizations to come to some level of a higher level value and consensus?
I love this because we just had an amazing event. It's our SKO where we had a real power panel. Like, you go to conferences, oh, check out the power panel. I'm like, well, you haven't seen a real one until you've seen this one. And my favorite is that, actually Aruna Shisonis, he was a visionary, he's an amazing leader in the channel, and he's been more in finance in the previous years. But you know, he was a mentor and he was a visionary, right? He did telecom at Paytech Communications, but he added energy in, right? And he said, and this was like 20 years ago, that the CIO who's making decisions over the telecom is eventually also going to make decisions over the energy. And that has happened. And so, you know, kind of bridging the gap there, you know, again, it has already happened where that buyer and that buyer journey is consolidating, right? In the same way that EIoT has become a thing that we're tapping and that we're exposing, that journey for the customer has also changed. So the CIO is now looking over the energy as well as the telecom. Hopefully that kind of addresses your question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And look, everybody, just so you know, we will have a link in the show notes below to the panel that Vince talked about. And again, when he says it's a power panel, it really is a power panel. Again, really resisting putting a joke in there. You know, I'm hearing you say all this, and I can't help but go back to what you were just saying about the harmonics. Is that just having a device plugged in? Well, we're plugged in everywhere. There's, you know, the companies that we talk with and we track, like you mentioned, Schneider, Vertiv, Caterpillar's another one. You know, these are Siemens and ABB. These are all, you know, companies that create power generation or at least power monitoring conditioning equipment. They are the backbone of all this. But we are now living in a world where we talk about being wireless, but we are all tethered by a cord at some point. We're all having to plug in the power up, make sure that we're, God, my wife goes into a panic if her iPhone goes below 70%. But you know, think about this in terms of data centers. I mean, they're building these massive campuses that have to have like the 5 nines of uptime. All right. So how much do you think that other technology vendors, you know, the both the product leaders, the sales leaders, the channel leaders of companies that are selling these devices and selling these applications have to take energy into account when they're going to market and thinking about their ecosystem opportunities?
I mean, I think at this point, people that are not looking at energy as part of the equation, like one example would be, you know, like a cybersecurity company. Well, how do I look at energy, right? What do I do with this, right? Well, in my opinion, you can't really say that a facility is completely secure until you address the energy in the facility. So one of the things we've seen is people looking at the tech, right? And looking at, you know, all the stuff I mentioned, access doors, you know, all this different stuff in the building, but only looking at the tech side of it, not the energy side of it. And so again, this is an area for someone to get in, right? So that's why we're so adamant about that. We feel so passionate about the fact that that's where the EIoT comes in. Let's bring the energy into a technical motion and let's consider it that way, as opposed to just a service that has been on the side of the conversation for so long, right? It's time to integrate this into the conversation because, you know, as we know, this energy proliferation there is no way this is going to go away. It's going to get more and more. Just really quickly, you mentioned the harmonic filter. So just to mention something related, you know, data centers, when they build near a community, actually, as they build it out, the harmonics get so strong that it can affect neighboring communities. The harmonic filter addresses that, right? So there are solutions to these problems. And for example, the fuel cells and the linear generators, right? They also address that problem because if you go off the grid and put this in, that harmonics problem is gone. Mm-hmm. And so we've actually been consulting with several on that exact topic. So hopefully that, you know, kind of address that one as well, because ultimately, yeah, if people are not integrating and looking at energy as part of the network, when I say the network, I mean what's important to them right now, there's going to be missed opportunities. There's going to be competitive disadvantages, and it will cause problems. You know, 5 years from now, if people are not looking at energy as a big part of the tech stack, they're going to have issues.
Yeah. How much do you think, or how much do you foresee this actually transforming from being a brokerage to an active service, where the companies that are actually going to be acting as outsourcers on this, or is that already happening now, where the managed service providers are jumping in here saying, okay, we're going to manage your servers, we're going to manage your security, we'll do your backup. Oh, and by the way, we're going to manage your power for you too, and do the cycling on that. I mean, we've had conversations with Eaton and Schneider about using managed service providers being able to use power supplies to cycle down and bring devices up and down for maintenance purposes. Why not do the entire cycle?
I agree, and it's such a relevant point because we just connected with one of the biggest cyber MSPs in the world, actually, and they're working with us already. Like the calls went really well, and they basically said, "Okay, yeah, we're leaving all kinds of business on the table. We design data centers, we optimize them, and we've just been sourcing all this stuff to other people that do it." And they were like, "Okay, we need to do this ourselves." So it's definitely a big factor. And I think that distribution should embrace it now instead of like, okay, we don't know how to do that. That's a whole different thing we need to learn about. Not really. IoT brings it all together. And I think that that's where people are forgetting that. It's like, well, the IoT sensors, right, connected to the energy, it's just the same, right? So
Yeah.
I love that question. I love that point.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you mentioned distribution on this, and I will say that, I'm actually going to be, talking, I'm giving a talk at the Global Technology Distribution Council Summit in a couple of weeks, towards the end of February in California. And this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about. This is a new opportunity that we need to be paying attention to. So thinking about this, Vince, in terms of, let's look forward a little bit. I mean, you're not sleeping. And it doesn't, in given that we're in a 4 to 6 year backlog on data centers, and even if we're bringing one online, like I think every 3 hours at this point, something ridiculous, it doesn't seem like this is going to abate anytime soon. Where do you see, looking forward beyond the next 12 months, this opportunity evolving into? What's the world going to look like from an energy management perspective?
So first of all, one thing I think that's important to mention is the value proposition with Abundant is our ability to give power to big commercial industrial customers, data centers, etc., in months, where the utility takes years. And I think people are hearing about this all over the place right now, where it takes 5 to 10 years to get power from the utility. And the grid's already dilapidated, so it's super expensive and the costs are going way up. So at the end of the day, yeah, that's where we're going right now. I would say in the next year to two, say in that range, there's going to be a massive shift. 26 alone, there's going to be a massive shift. Look at a couple of examples. Google, with an acquisition, 4.75 billion to end the year of an AI infrastructure data center company, right? And then I just saw one from Bloom Energy the other day in Wyoming, 1.8 gigawatt facility. And there goes their stock, right? Just absolutely took off. So, as distributors for all these companies and having relationships with them, we're pretty familiar with it. Again, I think it goes back to that Schmidt quote, right? 3% to 99% in just a few years. So when you look at 12 months, when you look at 27, just even a year from now, Larry, this conversation is going to be so incredibly relevant. I'm excited to see where it goes because of our impact. We're making a massive impact on it. We're helping with this journey, and it's just getting started.
Fantastic. Well, Vince, wish you the best of luck in this. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this edition of Changing Channels. Again, I want to thank our guest, Vince Bradley, the CEO and founder of Abundant IoT. And as always, I want to thank all of you for joining us here today on Changing Channels. We do this podcast and everything else we do at Channelnomics to help make the channel better for everybody that works in it. If you like what we're doing, please hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends. Check out the links to more information about Abundant IoT and the recent event that Vince talked about, as well as check out all the other services and products and information we have at Channelnomics. Until next time, I'm Larry Walsh.